of the water utilities already have rebate programs in place. Fairly modest incentives at this point for clothes washers. The energy utilities incentives range from like $35 to $75, something like that. Some of the water agencies have a little bit higher than that. We're suggesting that the state could heighten attention and interest in clothes washer replacement by actually topping off these incentive programs by suspending the state sales tax on the purchase of a high-efficiency clothes washer during the period of the drought emergency.
That's interesting.
Every 45 washers replaced is an acre-foot of water savings. So if you want to pencil that out. It could certainly be a positive part of the messaging that will need to continue and perhaps continue as the drought goes on and potentially even gets worse. But this is something that people can do. And given the amount of water that's involved in washing clothes, the governor's asked for a 20% cutback. Well, washing clothes with a legacy washer is responsible for about 20% of indoor water use, or about 10% of the total household water use. You figured that half the water use is outdoors. So with this one measure, a household in that situation could go a significant way of meeting the governor's request for a 20% cutback.
Right. Ed, we want to hear the other 3 points, so I'm going to ask you to do them quickly because your time's up. But do them because I want to hear. I want everybody, we have the paper, I want everybody else to hear.
Stormwater capture, it's been discussed. It's our most serious water quality problem, but it's a resource in disguise. Every inch of rain in Los Angeles County sends 30,000 acre-feet of water into the stormwater collection system and into the ocean. Far better to capture and use that on site or at regional collection centers. This is particularly for the board, a recommendation for the board. The water quality regulatory programs are not advancing our ability to beneficially capture stormwater for reuse or recharge, because they fail to sufficiently recognize and encourage these techniques as part of a local water quality compliance strategy.
We're trying to.
So we have a petition pending before this board. In the LA County MS4 proceeding, there's a consortium of nonprofits. We have a petition that we would urge favorable action on to help break this logjam. Thirdly, and I'll be brief here, but recognize the gravity of what we're proposing. With regard to water recycling, good goals, but we think a bigger vision would be useful. Virtually every group, every interest group, government agency promotes, supports additional water recycling. This could all be, but we're not meeting the goals in the policy resolution set by this board. These goals could be backstopped by action to bar the discharge of treated wastewater into the ocean by a date certain. We could follow the example laid out by Florida, where the discharge of treated water from the Florida Gold Coast, Miami, Fort Lauderdale area is barred as of 2025. We've provided the statutory reference for you in the material that we've given you. Finally, on pricing, this came up repeatedly this morning. Drought rates, drought pricing, drought rates, we think are really an essential tool that unfortunately has been too much overlooked.
With Lifeline, I'm assuming.
Well, they would be locally developed. So we're not suggesting that the state set specific levels or even particular criteria, just that drought rates be included in a drought contingency plan. All urban water suppliers have to prepare a water shortage plan. It's got to be part of the urban water management plan. And in that water shortage contingency plan, there is supposed to be a required element evaluating the financial impact of water shortages. but virtually none of our water suppliers have brought specific rates into their plans so that the rate adjustments match the stages of their drought plan. And also, virtually none of them have included drought contingency rates in their adopted rate schedule that they have presented to the voters. So they don't have it at hand ready to self-adjust so that they can adjust on the fly during the drought as it reaches different levels. Los Angeles does. The LA plan does involve rates, and their rates are part of their approved schedule, and they can adjust them on the fly based on the stages of their drought plan. That's what we need.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate all this and appreciate you doing this. Know that you're a national expert on this, so we appreciate you spending the time.
Glad to do it.
Great.
Ed, is this available at your website?
I'm glad you asked that. It will be.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Speaking of national experts, next we have Christine Compton from the Irvine Ranch Water District.
Good afternoon. I'm Christine Compton. I'm the Government Relations Manager at the Irvine Ranch Water District.
Good to see you.
Thank you for having us today. You know, obviously the drought has highlighted some areas where we need to improve. We all need to improve, and that's the theme that we've heard over and over again, not only today, but in the last, several months and before. And so at IRWD, we obviously strive to be a leader in a number of areas. And so I wanted to cover a couple of things that we've been focused on and that we hope that you would take into account as you consider what actions you want to take moving forward on the drought. The first area is, no surprise, recycled water. We've been a leader in recycled water. We've been serving recycled water since the 1960s, and we continue to expand our program. Last year, I just got the numbers in, we served almost 30,000 acre feet of recycled water. It makes up about a quarter of our water supply, and that's not including the groundwater that we get from the Orange County Water District groundwater replenishment system. It's purely recycled water we produce and serve for landscape, irrigation, agriculture, dual plumb buildings. But the bottom line is, we'd like to do more. We really view it as a resource. And so some of the hurdles we've had standing in the way are a couple things. One is recycled water storage. In order to be able to meet demand in a normal year, not necessarily this year, but the peak demand is in the summer, but you're producing recycled water all year long, and so you need to be able to put that water in storage. That way you can draw it down during the summer and serve it to the customers versus having to use potable supplies. And so that's something that we continue to work on, but I wanted to highlight it because I think it's an important part of the water picture as we go forward and should be taken into account. On that same aspect, it's using the resources and infrastructure we have today more wisely. And we have some recycled water reservoirs currently. We have to draw them down for 25-year storm protection. So we go from about 750 acre feet to 200 during the wet year. Well, in a year like this, we certainly don't need to draw it down for that protection. And so we would hope that we could work on some of those issues so that way we can use that storage that we have more wisely because it's already built.
And is that that's largely with either the Corps or with county flood control?
Actually, it's in
It's
your
at us?
recycled water storage policy, or
Right.
recycled water policy, and that then gets put into our permit at the regional board.
Right, okay. And they
But-
just worked that through at Sonoma County. So
I'm not sure if it's there's some legal issues associated with that, right? Because of MPDES versus WDR. I'm looking. to
No, that's just in
counsel.
some cases. It's just a question. We just worked it through with Sonoma County after the
Okay.
legislation. You have to, if you have an MPDS permit, we can work it through in the
Yeah.
permit.
Okay.
And we certainly
can
would
do
love
that.
to continue working on it.
Okay.
But yeah, there's
Just
clearly
one of the
something.
issues that's out there that we would love to, try and solve. Obviously, we would love to see more expanded permissible uses for recycled water and look at those regulations, move the regulations for indirect potable and direct potable use forward. IRWD was very fortunate that as our community developed, we were able to put in the purple pipe.
Yeah.
that's cost prohibitive in many communities. And so it really is looking to the next generation of, if we want to move recycled water use and expand it as rapidly as we do in the state of California, we really need to look to the next, and that's IPR and DPR.
Exactly.
I also wanted to comment on water use efficiency, because that's something that's very dear to our hearts at IRWD. And at IRWD, as many of you know, we have an allocation-based rate structure, and that's been a huge component in our water conservation and water use efficiency. We've seen since 1990 our usage go from 190 gallons per day down to an average about 90. And we continue to work with our customers to gain greater water use efficiency through all the programs that we've talked about today. And we've turned our attention to outdoor. We have a CalScape program. And so as you look at, I know funds are limited, but as you look at where to place those funds in the drought, we would recommend that you look at a tiered grant type of program for water use efficiency programs and conservation that focused, one, on supplementing and expanding existing programs. Why recreate the wheel? And get those programs to agencies that are doing it, so that way we can see greater savings sooner with consumers, and then work on the second side with those agencies that don't have conservation programs to really get them in place. That way we see not only short-term but long-term benefits going forward, as we will continue to see droughts. Also, finally, I wanted to comment that the other key component of this is really public awareness. And as we talk about all of this, we've all heard you need to take shorter showers, you need to turn off the faucet when you brush your teeth, but we really feel that the messaging needs to include specific actions that are different and unique that customers and Californians can take to conserve water. As part of that, we would also recommend that we try and set a new standard in the minds of Californians for what is appropriate for landscaping. That it be California appropriate landscaping, drought-proof landscaping, so that way we move from everybody wanting the green lawn to things that are better for our water supply. So with that, those are my comments that we just wanted to share with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for taking the time.
I just want to make sure that you know, and I think Dave Smith is here and he'll be speaking later, but the department, the DPH, the Department of Public Health, water, drinking water program, and the Water Board are working very hard to get the contracts finalized so that we can do more with storage of water. So that is, I'm optimistic that it will happen fairly soon.
Great. And speaking of Dave Smith, yeah.
Oops.
Well, actually, I looked for the first set of cards. I didn't see his card, and I was actually going to call on him even if he didn't have a card. So I'm glad you put in a card.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Madam Chair and other water policy makers. First, I want to just pick up on what Fran just said about the efforts going on to deal not only with these sort of short-term drought measures, but look long-term. I know all of you up there are spending a lot of time, a lot of extra time, making a lot of efforts successful so that those of us in the water business have as many barriers removed to doing our jobs as possible. So thank you for that. What I'd like to do is let you know about some of the measures that we have identified and proposed in January, when it first became evident with the governor's proclamation of a drought emergency that some measures could be taken. We put together a list of them that we've been engaging on with you, with your staff, and I just want to give you an update on some of those, where we are. But before jumping into that, I want to remind us, and I wouldn't be the first one to do that today, that we're going to face these droughts in the future. We're going to have large variation in our water supply, and the reliability of our water supply needs to be enhanced. And we have made bold proposals in the past to help us get there, one of which was just mentioned before, and that's direct potable reuse. We're getting a tremendous response from this board, from the Department of Public Health Drinking Water Program, and moving that forward. That's good. One of the proposals we made 2 years ago was to regulate recycled water as a water resource, not as a waste, we didn't get a very warm reception from your staff in particular on that. And I think that there's some opportunity there to revisit that in the current environment, and I would ask that we do that. So I'll start out going through very quickly a few of the items that we've proposed, and the first one is the State Revolving Loan Fund Program. I'm glad to hear it's been mentioned today. I've met twice with board staff, and as recently as this morning, and we've identified a number of refinements to the program that staff has embraced, and I think you're going to be hearing about them when they bring proposals to you in March for looking at the interest rate. But they're also able, without board policy action, to look at loan duration variability, customize the loan duration, customize the payment schedule, and maybe some loan consolidation. Number of variable factors that will make this, and subordination in particular, I think is an important issue for a lot of utilities, that will make the SRF program useful for them, and for some it is not useful now, given some of those constraints. One of the items that we've mentioned is that maybe just because none of us really anticipated the need, or some didn't, a lot of recycling agency permits don't allow recycled water to be trucked, to be hauled for uses. And this is not going to represent large uses. Obviously, you can't truck large volumes of water, but they're very economically important uses that would be at the other end of that truck route, particularly watering livestock. And tomorrow, Assemblyman Levine is holding a hearing in Petaluma where he's asking some questions about, well, why is it so difficult to get permission to do that? And I'm hoping DFA will have a representative there because some of the code that you enforce deals with the quality of water that's necessary for livestock watering.
Wait, can you, this is one of those questions we were trying to figure out, what the regs were on watering livestock with recycled water.
Okay.
Maybe just, I don't
Let
know.
me tell you
Karen,
what I've
you know,
learned in
Sandy was looking at it. I have a whole bunch of emails in here on it. Yeah.
We are aware of this. Our state vet is actually out of the state right now, but the head of our food safety division within animal health intends to be there tomorrow
great.
as a resource
Great.
because we're digging into the whole thing. It's just, you never know about organisms and animal health, and so we just have to make sure it's all balanced and taken into consideration.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out who knew. What was the point of?
It's going to be our state vet.
Thank you. Good.
As in veterinarians.
Right. Right.
Great.
Who may also be vets, so they could be vets. Yeah. Sorry.
Good. The general permit that you adopted for landscape irrigation has not been widely used, to maybe understate the issue a little bit. And I'm aware that your staff is looking very closely at how it might revise that permit and make it more useful. That would accelerate the permitting process. It would give certainty, and it would provide a clear and attainable pathway for recyclers to begin or broaden their non-potable recycling programs. And in that regard, we have proposed a number of changes to the non-potable water recycling regulations that we're hoping the Department of Public Health Drinking Water Division will look at quickly and identify which can be implemented just through possibly no regulation change at all, but clarifying department policy. And there may be some emergency regulation changes that are appropriate also, but we're anxious to engage in a discussion on that as soon as possible. We have identified a team of engineers that are willing on a gratis basis to visit communities, disadvantaged communities, to identify what the water recycling potential is, and then help them prepare applications for SRF funding and other sources of funding available to disadvantaged communities to get recycling programs up and running in some of those disadvantaged communities that are water challenged. We've heard, you visited one this last week, you mentioned, Madam Chair, and there are other communities, especially on the North Coast, that have recycled water potentially available, but they don't have the wherewithal to bring it to
Great.
fruition.
Thank you.
And so we're standing by ready with a group of folks who want to engage. I think we just need some structure to a program on how to pair up these volunteers with communities that are interested in receiving the help.
Thank you for that. That should be part of it when we roll out our recycled water acceleration plans. That we'll try and make that a part of it. That's
Great.
a good idea. Okay.
I haven't proposed it in previous written material provided, but this form here, very useful. I would suggest that you consider whether there's some not that any of us want or really maybe in some ways need more meetings on our schedule, but would suggest that for those agency representatives, I'm sure that internal to the administration you're already doing this to some extent, but to the extent that there are those of us outside immediate state government service that are in a position to help make some of these happen, some of these actions happen, it may be appropriate to invite, to hold a periodic, a recurring either conference call or something where we can communicate with one another, because there's legislation, there's various departments, there's water agencies, there's wastewater agencies, each with a role to play. And I feel like a lot of us are working real hard, talking to each other on more of a bilateral basis, and it may be that a more roundtable kind of discussion could move some of these things along further.
No, I think that's a good suggestion. We are doing it on some issues like groundwater, but, and this was a similar suggestion we got at our more water rights oriented and water quality management conversation last week too. It's hard to figure out how to do it because we have a lot of meetings, but you're right.
If there's a place for it,
Okay.
maybe we can make it happen. I'm willing to do
Good.
my part to help make it happen.
And then if you can, because you do have the opportunity to talk with a lot of us a lot of the time, because your time's up, try to wrap up.
Be rapid, thank you.
Yeah.
Be quick. In terms of commercial, industrial, and institutional water conservation and recycling, I would ask you to urge the Department of Water Resources that convened a multi-year process to develop a CII conservation and water recycling report, to make that report available. It's full of wonderful BMPs that industries, commercial operations can implement, and it's just sitting there on a shelf. It hasn't seen the light
Hasn't
of
been
day.
released?
No.
Huh, okay.
And so a lot of people put a lot of time into that, and we'd like to see it become available.
And that is scheduled for release very soon.
Oh, good.
How soon?
I think within a week or two, maybe.
That's great.
Yeah.
This is time for it. Thank you.
No, actually, it'd be great for us to, for someone to alert us when that one goes out, as well as send us the ag one that Danny was talking about earlier. That'd be good for us to all read.
Good. And I'll close by responding to a couple of points that were made by a number of speakers earlier. The gentleman from Orange County Water District commented on the trajectory that direct potable reuse is on as being in the 10 to 20 year category. And we are
I noticed that.
working to make sure that it doesn't take nearly that long. We are expecting the technical information to be available for the Drinking Water Division to begin considering projects in more like the 3-year time frame. And there's a lot of people working hard to achieve that, and I expect us to attain it. Thanks in great part to the Drinking Water Division for getting these panels up and running. There was a comment that several commenters suggested that a key solution to our water supply issues would be to prohibit discharge to the ocean and of wastewater. It's true that there's a lot of water going to the ocean. There's 3.5 million acre-feet being discharged to the ocean every year of water that could be, some of which could be recycled. But I want to point out we can't recycle it all because we have a salt and nutrient management planning process underway, and we cannot retain all the salt and nutrients with a zero discharge and still maintain healthy soils and a healthy environment. So these potable reuse projects in general are going to require reverse osmosis. That produces a waste that has to go someplace, and it's going to have to go to the ocean. And so we cannot achieve a zero discharge environment, nor do I think it's in the state's interest to require zero discharge to the ocean, because we've got certain places where there's recycled water or wastewater available where it couldn't all be recycled, and there are some places where there isn't enough wastewater to go around. So we've got a mismatch there that a regulation or a law would not recognize. So I'll stop there and thank you again for your efforts to help deal with this drought, but also prepare us for the future ones as well.
Thank you very, very much for all yours as well.
Yeah, that's great. Dave, real quickly, I'm sorry to stretch this out, but the previous speaker from Irvine talked about, laid out, there's a lot of cost to putting in the purple pipe to implement recycled water in lieu of an IPR, DPR, direct potable reuse kind of framework. Do you think there's a place, given what we've heard today about how disadvantaged communities and smaller communities really struggle to pencil out recycled water, that if shown to be protective of public health, that's really an economically superior alternative moving forward, and not having a dual distribution system? I mean, could you give me, I know it's not a simple answer, but could you expound on that a little bit?
The concern we would have with disadvantaged communities operating a potable reuse system is that it requires some considerable sophistication to assure the reliability of the treatment operations to deliver high-quality water. And so I'm not sure disadvantaged communities would be a good match. In some cases, probably so. In some cases, probably not a good match with a potable reuse scheme. You're right that non-potable systems that require distribution systems can be more expensive than potable reuse systems. And so we'd be looking to evaluate not only what the proximity of the demands are to the source of water, but what the capabilities, what the resources are in communities to operate various types of recycling systems. So you're right, it's complex, but I think there's, in many cases, there's a recycling opportunity for communities that have a wastewater system.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that point to be made. Thanks.
Madam Chairman, are we going to be getting these comments in writing? Some of these have got pretty detailed ones that are hard to capture very fast.
We would get it to the extent that people choose to submit them, but we didn't require that people
Right.
submit them.
It would be nice to get Dave's, and then Allison also from California Coast Keepers had a lot of very definite ones, and some of the others. Thank you, Ed, for having yours in writing. That was very helpful. And Peter.
Everything, all comments that were received are being posted on the website, and they'll be posted along with the workshop agenda as well as the panelist information.
Great, thank you very much. Nick Chapman from the Alameda County Fair. Nick, I'm really sorry. I knew you were in there, and I had checked it. I was going to call you, and I turned it over because I checked it early. I apologize.
Welcome. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Nicholas Chapman, PE. I am with the Alameda County Fair down in the Pleasanton area. And I've heard a lot of comments today about what can be done, suggestions, stuff for long term. Maybe I'm a little out of order, but we have a project that is short term. And I'd like to outline that very briefly to you. The Alameda County Fairgrounds serves approximately 750,000 people a year go through those fairgrounds. In addition, we have over 2,100 livestock. We have about 400 racing horses that we board and race at the fair during normal times yearly. We then increase that to 800 plus during the fair, which is approximately June and July. In addition to that, we also have about 2,300 other animals that we deal with during the fair time and at various times throughout the year. Kennel clubs, dog this and that, and various other things. What we have done is we are looking at the discharge of the effluent that we get from washing the livestock during peak periods of time, and then year-round for the horses. These race horses need to be washed daily. In the process of that and other types of washing down and such, there tends to be animal waste that happens, and it goes directly into the storm drain. And we have been dealing with that in various ways of shifting it over to the sewer and various other things. Given that the fair is dedicated to green and is probably the most green fair in the state, we have got 1 megawatt of electricity that we've installed. We totally recycle, but we have this piece of the puzzle that we're missing, and that is, instead of discharging not only the storm drain, but also the effluent from these horses and various animals, we started on a program a year ago, knowing that we're probably going to hit a drought, and our wells on site, 270 acres, may not be able to be enough. And we'd have to draw from the city of Pleasanton, who is already hurting. So this project that we started was to be able to recycle that effluent, in addition to handle some of the storm drain runoff, recycle it through various systems, then put it back into our golf courses, drip irrigation, various other things, because we have thousands of trees we have to take care of. The program is ready to begin. We can actually, at this point, start digging. The funding for that is not in place. So I listened to the funding sources, and I'm saying, oh boy, most of this is going to be 2015, 16, 17. What is going to happen right now? What if there are projects that are ready to go right now, save considerable amount of money and resources and water? We are a designated area for a disaster in a sense that we are the emergency, I can't remember the term, where we can take in 100,000 people onto our site, provide electricity, water, food, on and on it goes. So we're looking at it as not only being able to service those people if there was an emergency, but what if that happened during the drought? Our water table can handle another well, so we are going to be working with Zone 7 to see if we can open up one of our other wells. There were approximately 7 back in 1912 that Zone 7 controls, and we only used 2 of those. And we want to get this project moving forward. So my question is, will there be some published data or something on a fast track? For example, the strike force, I think, is an appropriate means of doing that, prioritizing what projects can get off the ground immediately for immediate savings, as well as the bang for the buck over a certain period of time, not eliminating the others, bring them along, because this is going to be a reoccurring thing. And if we have an El Nino next year, we certainly don't want to forget where we're at right now. So if the board can steer us in the correct area for funding, I would greatly appreciate that being put on the burner somewhere and showing us where to go, because we would like to start digging tomorrow morning. The exhibit demonstrator to show this will be put on in June 15th, and approximately 500,000 people will be going by the exhibit, including your kids. So you're teaching your kids, you see the, hate to say it this way, you see the crap going in that clear pipe? It goes through this system. We open it up, they see the filtration mats and aeration drip mats, and it comes out clean, and oh, see this fish in the aquarium? See the water coming in? That's what's going on.
Great. My suggestion is you walk right to that corner and talk to the head of our Division of Financial Assistance. We'll do customized consultation here.
Love it.
Immediate and customized consultation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Terry Mitchell for CASA and the SAC Regional.
Good afternoon, Chair Marcus, board members. My name is Terry Mitchell. I manage the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Program for the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District. However, today I'm also representing CASA on behalf of Bobby Larson. She sends her regrets that she wasn't able to make to this afternoon's hearing. There was a CASA conference in DC that an annual conference. First, I'd like to commend the State Board and staff for their collaborative efforts, working towards solutions to increase the production and use of recycled water. As many of you know, CASA also works very closely with water reuse, and we support the comments that were provided earlier by Mr. Smith and the recommendations. There are a variety of actions that have been suggested today that can help improve water supply reliability through the development of recycled water projects, both in the short term and long term. I think we all recognize that investments in water recycling are among the vital few opportunities where we're having a new source of water created, and that needs to get integrated into all our water delivery systems for municipal, agricultural, and industrial. One area that I'd like to expand on a little bit is with respect to the SRF program. And what could we do that would help expedite getting water recycling projects online more quickly? And I think there are some modifications that could be made to the SRF program. And I know some of these efforts are already underway. Water Reuse is working with Water Board staff and looking at seeing on how to implement some of these changes. For instance, providing very low interest or zero interest loans and extending the payback periods on those SRF loans will make a tremendous difference to get these projects in the construction mode and online. That incentive, I think, is desperately needed. We're all aware that federal and state grant opportunities are diminished, and by providing that lower interest rate and the longer payback term, it really helps local communities be able to move water recycling projects forward that may have the feasibility studies done. Everything's ready to go. They just need that extra funding. And it's amazing what the difference of a lower interest rate and that extended term can make. For instance, if you have a project that you take a loan out at, say, 0.5%, that's comparable to receiving a 41% grant match. So it really takes us over that hurdle. There are other changes that I think are also important with the SRF program. If we can streamline the application process and modify some of the credit terms that need to be provided. For instance, if there's some clarity on when an application is deemed complete, that is helpful, and also modifying the senior lien subordination requirements. Many agencies have to secure municipal bonds to construct their projects, and when you're going through that bonding process, in order to have them be second in line, is very challenging. That's especially difficult, I think, for some large agencies. Our agency is an example. We're moving forward with the Echo Water project. It'll be over $2 billion. We have a water recycling project that we're looking to expand recycled water in the south area that will provide 50,000 acre feet per year of water. Trying to finance those and have the second lien subordination makes it very challenging.
Is that something that we do, or is that something EPA requires?
It's something that we do, and we'll be talking about that.
All right, so that's one of the things. Okay.
Yes, which is great news. I know these issues are being worked, and we're very appreciative that effort's going forward. So those are some of the comments that we wanted to expand on a little bit. Lastly, I would encourage that any funds that get allocated for water recycling projects hopefully aren't just allocated based on geographical basis, or should be based on geographical basis, not just including population. So trying to look at see if what kind of criteria might be able to be expanded, multi-benefit projects, those type of activities. And I think the other last point I'd like to make is that as we're moving forward with water recycling projects and applications going forward with SRF loans, that we need to make sure that agencies have enough time to get on those priority lists. In the past, many agencies may not have applications submitted, are not in the queue, but with these changes that are moving forward to streamline, I think many agencies will find it appealing and will be submitting those applications. So we need to be able to get those applications in the queue so they can be considered. And that's good news, because there's going to be opportunities to move those projects forward. So again, I'll end that, the testimony, and again, thank Water Board staff and members for taking this on, and Water Reuse also for leading the effort.
Thank you very much. Good? Okay, great. That was great. Next, Mr. Bob Anderson from United Wine Growers.
Thank you, Chair Markets. Bob Anderson, Executive Director, United Wine Growers, and represent both vineyards and wineries in Sonoma County, and appreciate service of all the members of the panel and Secretary Ross, Chair Marcus, for your trek up to the North Coast to see how things are doing there. Appreciate getting out and seeing what we're up against in terms of lack of water in Lake Mendocino, and it's in fact.
It was sobering.
And I was here last week, and I just wanted to come back and, you know, my sense of things is my guys are either at the step up and do something or hunker down and try to get through the worst of it in terms of frost season. Between now, frost in Sonoma County will start March 15th, more or less. And I'm going to ask you, that is the request today. Board member Spivey Weber last week said think outside the box. I'm going to ask you to stretch the box. I mean, I recognize you have laws you have to work within, but on Friday afternoon called together 30 or 40% of the landowners, representing 30-40% of the land anyway, in the Russian River Valley, Alexander Valley area, with the news that they're facing curtailment notices. And this will stir things up for certain in the local community, and there's a willingness to work with you, with your staff, sit down and try to figure out a different approach. As the Driscoll representative this morning said in their panel, we all have something to lose, and I think there's a willingness to work it out at the community level and find ways that we could actually share the pain and not have a junior, senior, and somebody who's got a senior right may not need that water, but on its face be given the permission to use it, and somebody else be cut off entirely. And would just highlight that representing permanent agriculture, they have to think not just, well, I'm going to not plant this year and take the year off and we'll tough it out. They're going to have to keep their vines alive, functioning, and, you know, we can hope for rain. The drought won't be over, even if we do get some rain the next few days. But the request is simply to be able to sit down with you and work out something so that people know where they stand. If they were to step up, there are things they can do. There is new technology in the sprinkler heads that can stretch water efficiency, reduce water use by 15%. Guys are prepared to do that if there's a reason to be part of a whole management plan rather than wait and see what letter comes in the mail and cut them off. So that's the request.
Okay. It would be good to touch base with Karen, because we can't unilaterally, this is the place where we don't have a lot of discretion. However, you all as neighbors can come to whatever agreements you want. It's a little complicated, and so it'd be good to, if you want someone at your meeting that has expertise in water rights, we can try and do that. But it is very different than our standards implementation role, which is one where we have a lot of latitude to act in the public interest. So, but again, it's not undoable, it's just not something we can make people do. So if you guys can touch base, that'd be helpful, just to be able to figure out what we can and cannot do and what resources we can provide.
And throw in one additional request on the 30-day storage, if there's a way to stretch that out so we take water early in the season and keep it longer.
Right.
I think that would be not upsetting the apple cart for years to come, but in the conditions we're facing, it would be very helpful.
That's one of the things on my list from the North Coast trip, but I haven't gotten a chance to download with anybody yet. So
All right.
add that one. Great, thanks a lot. Next is Lisa Lurie from the RCD of Santa Cruz County. Is that the appropriate way to put it? Is like the RCD of X county versus X county RCD?
It varies, actually.
It's
Yeah.
just whichever. Do you always say it that way?
We
And other-
go by RCD of Santa Cruz County, but each one is slightly different.
That's just interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Just to keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I am a conservation specialist with the Resource Conservation District of Santa Cruz County, working closely with partners in the Pajaro Valley on several of the projects that you heard about today. Just by way of introduction, for those who aren't familiar with RCDs, we are non-regulatory special districts. We work with landowners on both agricultural and residential lands on implementing voluntary conservation programs, and have had the benefit of working in partnerships with the agencies represented here today in local delivery of conservation programs. I just wanted to reiterate some of the points that were made this morning about the importance of local solutions and really emphasizing the need to support public and private collaborative models like the community water dialogue in addressing some of these really difficult, challenging issues. In terms of what the water boards can be doing to respond to the drought, first, as was stated, to acknowledge the planning that is happening at the local level and positioning state funding and support for those locally driven solutions. For us in the Pajaro Valley, those priorities are outlined in our basin management plan, as well as through the collaborative efforts like the community water dialogue. So some of those priorities fall into capital improvement types of projects. Like an earlier speaker today, our community has identified the need to increase our storage capacity for our recycled water facility. So that's a clear priority and a shovel-ready project. But also, I think it was Peter on one of the earlier panels today said it very eloquently that a lot of what we need to do doesn't actually require a shovel. And so we really are looking to further partners to help us in meeting our 5,000 acre feet conservation objective through things such as multi-year funding for technical assistance on improving irrigation efficiency, investing in those tools and decision support technology for growers. And the state board and other agencies have really been strong partners in funding those types of projects with the RCDs in the past. There are, however, some barriers to utilizing state funds whose language and contract requirements are really best suited for the capital improvement types of projects, which then creates some barriers in applying state funds to these smaller decentralized types of conservation projects.
Can you just give us a quick example?
Sure. So some examples include contract requirements around 15 to 20 year useful life maintenance and site access, GPS reporting, and also some of the requirements around labor compliance. And we come into some of those challenges when we're working both on agricultural and residential lands on these smaller scale projects. And I know that this isn't the first time that some members have heard about these barriers, so I really want to acknowledge the conversations that have happened to date. That's really important, and we're making progress. But I really want to encourage the state board to continue those conversations, to continue working with the local partners and the RCDs in better understanding and overcoming those barriers. And especially now as we're looking at how short-term funding and drought response can be best implemented. Of course, looking at those funds that do apply to needed and immediate capital improvement projects, but also looking at what of those funds are available and suitable to help us in working with partners on the other types of decentralized projects. So in closing, we really share the goals of working collaboratively to address water conservation and addressing the drought and putting public funds to their highest and best use most cost effectively and accountably. And just really want to reach out and encourage ongoing conversations about those.
Great, thank you very much. And as always, I'm a big fan of RCDs, so thank you for that unique role you play. It helps us all.
We appreciate your partnership.
And I want to add to your list, and I know some of the staff have heard me say this before, but investing in watersheds may not be a shovel-ready capital construction project, but can be hugely beneficial if to the water agency or to the agricultural area. So I believe that our SRF can do that. Oftentimes, you can't get bonding authority to do it, but actually, the San Francisco PUC is exploring making it, getting some of the accounting rules changed over the next few years that would allow for bonding authority to cover those kind of non-capital, but nevertheless very applied approaches.
That's great, and I'd be happy to be a part of hearing more about that progress. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Next, Tim O'Laughlin from the San Joaquin Tributaries Authority.
Thank you, Board Chair Marcus, for letting me speak today. Tim O'Laughlin, representing the San Joaquin Tributaries Authority. For most of you, this is not going to be applicable. I'm totally off subject on a different matter, a hangover from last workshop on the 18th and 19th. I want to talk a little bit about curtailment. Last week I offered, and actually your staff took me up on my offer. We had a 3-hour conversation with Mr. O'Hagan, Mr. Castle, and Ms. Heinrich about the upcoming curtailment notices on post-14 water right appropriations in the San Joaquin Valley. It was a very interesting conversation. We exchanged a lot of information, and one of the things that we went back and had a policy group and an attorneys meeting for the San Joaquin Tribs. And one of the things we talked about is how we can supply you with information. One of the things that, as we go forward in this drought, is trying to understand and manage expectations about what people think we're going to get with certain actions. And I think it's very important to try to understand what we have to deal with, and where that can take us. And so I'm going to just generally kind of give you a brief overview. What we'd like to do is tell you what our current operation plans are from now through the summer, leading into the end of the water year, which would be September 30th. And that would give you a picture. I'm going to try to reach out to the upstream folks, but I think that discussion on the San Joaquin Upper River and the exchange contractors is probably going to be pretty short, and I can probably plug that piece in pretty quickly. But what we want to try to do is give you an idea of what our current projected outlook is and what our releases are going to look like, so you and your staff know. Because one of the things that concerns us is that you're going to have a post-1914 curtailment notice, and based on what we know in the watershed, the largest projects in the watershed aren't going to be using their post-14 rights anyway, because as your staff pointed out, we're already below the post-14, so we're already into the pre-14. So when March 1st comes around, unless the hydrology changes dramatically, the runoff is just going to be so low that you're already going to be into the pre-1914 water rights. So we want to give you that idea about what that picture looks like. There's also some upcoming flow requirements that have to be met on the San Joaquin River pursuant to D1641, and we'd like to talk to you about that. And then finally, there are various anomalies in the system based on agreements, based on water right priorities. So I'm going to briefly explain one of them to you to give you an idea about how we need to know what you're trying to shoot for and what your goal is. Like was stated earlier, if you have a specific goal and a specific target and you know what you can do specifically, you should do it. So on the Stanislaus River, I'll use it as an example. Oakdale and South San Joaquin have what's called the Tri-Dams Project. It's upstream reservoirs in the Stanislaus National Forest. They store water generally in the April-May time period. They release it during the summer for hydro generation, runs down, hits New Melones. Oakdale and South San Joaquin own the Tri-Dam projects. They are also the senior water right holder. They are entitled to the first 1816.6. So one of our concerns is that if you issue a post-14 curtailment notice, they would be cut off upstream. And we understand that. We're all for water right priority. But the net effect of it is you're going to be dropping these reservoirs in the upper watershed, and basically within it's a 28-day period, that water is going to be evacuated. So any water that came in March, April would be gone by the end of May. And those reservoirs would basically be empty, because under a post-14 right, you couldn't store the water past 28 days. The net effect of that is
This is
it
the
hit,
30-day issue.
yeah, well, we'll, 28 or 30.
Whatever it
We'll,
is.
we'll
Okay, fine.
well, yes, you are correct.
We're in
That-
February. 28's
Whatever
a
that
month.
issue
Yeah,
is, yes.
whatever.
But the net effect is that even if that water shows up in New Maloney's, you have Oakdale and South San Joaquin with the senior water rights there who would take it. So our concept or idea and what we want to try to do is see if there's a process. We understand the notice is going out. We want to work with your staff, but we want to come back and say, look, if we can show that those water rights by holding water upstream for hydro generation, which we're going to need this summer, for water in those streams upstream for protection for cold water pool, they were used during the firefighting season. So, I mean, there's a lot of benefit to holding water, not having to come down into New Maloney's. And as we could show that no downstream post-14 right is impacted, we should talk about how we've set up a process where we deal with your staff. And because we don't want to file a protest and you don't want to file a CDO, and we want to do something to build a better mousetrap, I guess. And we'd like to hear from you and your staff about how we can do that. And then we're going to provide you with a briefing paper, hopefully by the end of the week, about how we see current operations. Because one of the things, and I'm just real quick, one of the things I'm really concerned about here, and that my clients are as well, and I said this last week and I'm really going to say it again, and I can't overemphasize it enough, the modeling that we're doing and the things that we're finding out on the ground, even for old people like me who've been through the 87 through 92 drought, they just aren't applicable. So what we think is going to happen when you release 100 CFS of water in a system just may not react the same way that you saw under previous conditions. And so the expectation that certain water is going to show up in certain locations as we move not only through the April-May time period, but through the summertime is going to be much different. And we'd like to share with you what some of our thoughts about what that might look like, as bad as it might be.
So you had a 3-hour meeting with the staff. Do you have another 3-hour meeting scheduled this week?
No, hopefully I can get my paper done and sent to them in time by Friday so that they won't have to listen to me again. They can just read it.
Well, it's helpful to read and then discuss. I would say generally it's very complex stuff, and obviously we have, as I said earlier, Mr. Anderson, we have less flexibility in general, but if the water rights holders talk to us about how to implement that is something that gives us perhaps a little more flexibility, because you're always...
Yeah, no, we agreed with your staff. I mean, it's very important that the water right priority system be followed. I think the key is, though, that given some of the agreements and some of the contracts and some of the other things that you just don't see on
the face of a water right.
On
Exactly.
the face of a water right are in play. And if we go through that analysis, then what? But my representation to you and to the other board members would be is, before we come in and say that, we have to make sure that we are not impacting prior post-14 water rights downstream. I mean, that is the foundation of anything that we would ask of you and your staff as we move forward. So we just like to know if there's a process.
So you'll do something Friday, and then, so you'll submit something Friday, and then they'll meet with you. But we're not going to do everything in front of the board, because we don't meet that often. So it's good that you're telling us all here, and our able staff will meet with you.
Perfect.
Well, and I'll just jump in here to say thank you, and to Sonoma as well, in being creative on this, and I'm hoping that it spreads. So I think it's good that you did appear before us, because for folks that are out there listening, you know, these are challenges, but also opportunities for some creativity.
Well, and the other thing we'd like to, and not to put you on the spot, but as policy folks that are going to be managing a large part of what we've been, or will be doing this year, we kind of want to know what you envision or what you see happening in the San Joaquin River Basin as we go forward. I mean, you know, we heard about public trust, we heard about delta outflow, we heard about conservation, we heard other things that your staff, but if you have ideas or concepts, the sooner we know what you're thinking and what your vision is, because already in our districts, they're making allocations, farmers are planning, we have carryover storage allowances, we have in-stream flow releases that we're doing, so that would be helpful.
The thing that's most helpful is if you give us specifics in some ways to react
will.
to. I will tell you, just as one person, that looking at the lack of hydrology, this week's rain notwithstanding, that for all the concern we have about, huge concern about what's going to be happening to agriculture, I mean, I think where the impact is almost beyond comprehension. Being concerned about public trust resources, but the bottom line, top priority has got to be having enough water for basic public health and safety needs. I think we're in that desperate a situation in many places, but we'd have to look at the particulars of a given water body or watershed to be able to give you feedback.
Well, I'm going to speak off point here and not representing my clients, but my personal opinion based on some of the hydrology I've seen and I share your concern deeply. I think we're going to see things this year with hydrology and river systems and stream systems that we haven't seen before. And quite honestly, I can imagine a situation where the lower San Joaquin River would not have flow in it this summer. Yeah. And I don't say that lightly. That's a major issue. But the hydrology is very poor, and even with in-stream flow releases and other releases, groundwater pumping's already started in January. People were turning on pumps. Antecedent conditions are really poor. So we'd like to share with you what we have to give to you, to help you, and then you share with us what you want to see trying to come as we move forward during the next 3 to 6 months. Okay. And I thank you for your time. I'm sorry to interrupt your workshop today.
No, it's fine. It's part of the whole workshop. That's helpful.
Great. Thank you very much.
And I just want to mention as well that at the last workshop, we talked a lot about transparency and getting information up on our website as quickly as we could, especially for the priority watersheds that we were discussing last week. And the San Joaquin, of course, was one of them. And I don't know the extent to which in the meeting with Mr. O'Loughlin earlier, the supply curves, et cetera, were shared with him. We're working to refine those so we can post them right now. And we're working with DWR to make sure we have accurate information, and they'll be up soon. But if we haven't shared them, we will, and we will be making those available as soon as we can more broadly.
Right, and it's good to be able to have the conversation before we implement, just in case, as has happened, we don't understand the actual carom or cascading effect of various agreements. Again, our job is the water rights system, but we need to know what the impact's going to be. So, good. Thank you both. Dave Boland from the Association of California Water Agencies. Hi, Dave.
Thank you, Chair Marcus, and all you decision makers up there. We've heard a lot of great ideas. I think this has been an extremely good example of the collaborative nature of what we're facing here with this drought situation. I just wanted to hit a couple of plugs, kind of high points, is what Aqua's up to, what the water agencies are up to in general. The fact that if you haven't been there, Aqua website's got this great map graphic. It's got red and yellow and green dots for what agencies reported to us. We're keeping it up real time. It tells about the various stages. And in case you haven't been asked that question yet, we have been. No, we don't have a standardized staging approach in water. Various water agencies have different definitions of what their stages are, and they're approaching it differently, as we know. So that's kind of a clearinghouse role the Aqua website has. We have a drought briefing piece, or a drought briefing event that happened last week that was really well attended and got a lot of good information out there. And then we have this drought update that we put out weekly, and you can sign up for that and get that in your mailbox as well. The Save Our Water situation, we are partnering with the Department of Water Resources to make sure that that Save Our Water site is a real robust place that we can send a lot of folks to about the consumer education side of this thing. And there's a lot of great information there. We have a lot of links to a lot of other great information. We have made a transition from sort of the lifestyle message about saving water because we're Californians. It's the right thing to do. And as a matter of fact, we branded a new motto out there. It's Californians Don't Waste. That's the new campaign. And now we're kind of pivoting and looking at drought response, trying to put everything in terms of the immediacy of this drought situation and responding in those terms. and that public education campaign could be more aggressive, we know. We're trying to hold our powder dry a little bit. There is a nuancing here in terms of how we communicate with the public. And as we know, there are a lot of different kinds of messages, a lot of different realities out there about the way this drought is unfolding. A lot of people are kind of hoping and holding their breath, in terms of maybe April miracles now. And so we want to make sure that when we do put out really extreme messaging, it kind of is related to the extremity of the situation. And so, we could use some input, and we appreciated Kevin's idea there that maybe we should have upped the ante. We maybe will. And maybe
I
we
just
can
think
borrow some of
that
his
the
graphics.
teen showers thing is big. That's
Pardon?
all. The teen shower thing is
The teen
big.
shower thing,
I'm
yeah.
told.
There's probably a lot of good ideas that we can mine, but anyway, and we're open to those ideas, by the way. On drought, there was a number of comments about the California Water Action Plan. I just want to make sure that it's understood that Aqua is really supportive of the fact that the administration came together and put that thing out there. That is a really relatively brief and yet really focused piece that captures the complexity and the fact that we need comprehensive water management solutions.
Great.
And then that leads me to the plug for Aqua. We have our own SWAP that we put out that is very
SWAP
eerily
is so much
similar.
better than QAP. I really.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it
it's
is.
sort of-
Yeah, we
I keep
were
calling
kind
it the
of
administration
internally
water action
struggling
plan,
about
just so you can't say anything like that.
how to brand the acronym. Sometimes acronyms are worse than just laying it out there. Our plan and the administration plan are very similar. There's a lot of important elements there. There are some distinctions. We do want to underscore the fact that there are some issues about how we fund this going forward and kind of nuancing about the stepwise approach rather than all of the above sort of approach. And that leads me to the water plan and plugging the water plan. The fact that the water plan has for years had this portfolio kind of approach to California water, that it's not a stepwise approach, that a loading order probably isn't the right idea, that in fact there are a whole bunch of things that we need to be doing all at the same time. And we are doing them all at the same time all over the state. And so the water plan is a great compendium for resource management strategies that we're, as a water industry, committed to implementing in various ways in various parts of the state. And then that underscores the importance of storage, both surface and groundwater, and conveyance, and that those are kind of a critical element to our water management reliability picture that has been brittle and is brittle. And we do recognize, and I think the state recognizes, the need to address this so that these kinds of drought situations, maybe even if they happen more frequently, they don't happen quite as drastically as this particular set of circumstances seems to be unfolding. And finally, just a whole bunch of other implementation things that we've been committed to for a long time, the Department of Water Resources is involved in. Danny mentioned the Ag Stakeholder Committee. We have an urban stakeholder committee that's been meeting for a number of years to roll out the 20 by 2020 process. We've got a lot of moving parts in the at the department on quasi-regulatory efforts and guidebooks and the CII task force piece that's about to come out. There's any number of important initiatives that will all help to promote this kind of reliability ethic long term. Again, they may not be immediate things that you can push a button on and they are going to result in a certain amount of acre feet just, overnight. But they are all important and we need to proceed with them and not act as if suddenly we're in a new world and that suddenly we have to stop everything we've been doing and do something different. In fact, we need to continue to do what we have been doing well. Maybe focused, maybe funding some things more strategically, and I heard a lot of great ideas about repurposing and refocusing some of our funding mechanisms, some of our prioritizations. I just wanted to plug for the DWR's got a rates and surcharges workshop that they're putting together. Aqua's helped them get some good speakers for that. Rates and surcharges was an issue here, this whole drought kind of emergency or drought response sort of rates issue. It's a touchy issue with water agencies. Water agencies like to manage their rates locally. They always have, they always will. We think that's the right tool, a local approach. But we think that there are some templates and some ideas out there that we can roll out. And that workshop's coming up on the 4th of March. And it's open to all comers. There's a big effort at the Water Council, the California Urban Water Conservation Council. And again, Aqua's partnering. A lot of our member agencies are members of that council. A lot of the Group 2 folks, the environmental community, are members of that. And we're working on water rates and looking at BMP 1.4, which is to send a conservation pricing signal and maybe try to make that more robust. And there are a lot of good ideas on the table to try to make sure that pricing signal is appropriate. Again, there's a balancing act. We've got to have the revenues, and I appreciated hearing that theme coming up time and again. The recycled water situation, really appreciate Dave Smith and all the other speakers that have been hitting on the importance of not just traditional recycled water, but direct potable reuse. And I think, you know, it's really time for us to look at the long-term future here and revisiting maybe the policy in terms of the goals, and then what are we doing to make it happen, and maybe thinking of ways that we can look at the opportunities we have with the integration of the drinking water program at the water board, and some of the policies that are in play right now on recharge and on treatment and so forth, and try to really incentivize and really remove barriers at every step to trying to really increase our commitment to recycled water in California.
Right.
And finally, just you know, just a couple of other things, streamlining transfers. I know that's job one. It's on the, you know, there's a number of different punch lists here
To the extent there's anything to transfer.
Pardon?
To the extent there is anything to transfer.
Yeah, well, that's the point. But in effect, and this is kind of underscores a lot of the messaging here, is that you never waste a good crisis. That's what Tim's going around saying these days. This is a bad situation, but it's an opportunity for us to rethink maybe some of the ways we've been doing business for a while. And so if indeed we can make water transfers more effective, when there is water to transfer, it'll be faster and easier to get it. And I heard some of the environmental community actually underscoring the importance of water transfers to the environment. And so this is a tool that we need to make sure works, and we need to try to remove as many kind of bureaucratic roadblocks as we can. And then finally, incentivizing stormwater capture. And I just appreciated the way the water board's taking a lead on that. There's a process in play right now by a bunch of folks to kind of think about a vision piece on stormwater capture. I know there's a work plan that's on order here with the staff.
Right.
And we really look forward to cooperating with the staff on that and making sure that, again, we maybe treat stormwater sort of how we looked at recycled water a few years ago, where it's really important to put a big policy underscoring on the importance of it.
Great.
And it's probably time to do that. So we're cautiously optimistic, I guess, about all the things that we've been doing that can be repurposed as all drought all the time. But we got to keep doing this, you know, even if we do get lucky this year, or if we scoot through with a 2-year drought, or heaven forbid a 3-year, or as the National Geographic has been talking about, a 200-year drought. We just need to redo the way we do things. And so this is an opportunity, and we're looking forward to engaging with the board and with the other parts of state government and with all the other stakeholders in moving the ball.
Thank you, David, and thank you for your leadership and thought on all of these issues. We appreciate it. It is one of those things where people do talk about Australia frequently because they went through the millennial drought. If you listen to the whole story, they made some missteps in the first few years of those drought. And so now by the end of the 13th year, they did a lot of things that they wish they had done in the first few, and I hope we can short circuit some of that.
And these things do bear fruit. They're incremental, but they do bear fruit
They
in
do.
time.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Bruce Resnick from PCL. Did we lose Bruce? Sorry. All right. Catherine J.P. Loud, Palo Alto Park Mutual Water Company.
Good afternoon, and
Afternoon.
thanks for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I really just came to hear what was going on, but in terms of thinking out of the box, it's an idea that I have, although it will not alleviate the drought condition that the state is currently facing, but I think it will, in the future, give at least some stability to the use of water, and it's thinking on a global plane and nationwide, and it would involve all the states in the union, and like we all know about supply and demand, and we know how we use different methods to get whatever commodities we are short of in one area to another area. So if we put that into practice as it relates to water, like we have the aqueducts here in California. And so if we, and we have the transportation routes, the Interstate 40, Interstate 20, that crisscross the country. So if we were to develop a water system that would go from one state to the other, where we have the fresh water, and move it to the states, it would create jobs that would be long-term, long-lasting. And it would move the water to areas where it needs to be, because we're not the only state that faces drought and drought conditions at different times. And so we would capture this water, say, before it runs off into the Mississippi or into the Pacific Ocean or wherever, and we would be able to ship it either by aqueduct means or big water mains. And I think it's something that it would definitely require the whole state, the whole country to be involved in, and it would definitely speak to employment in every state, because then we would all have to maintain our system. And some things we could use, some of those natural waterways that are already in place, like getting water to the Colorado River, you know, and then it would move on and to whatever bodies of water that's there already, to utilize those in the network of pushing this water where it needs to be. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you very much. Thanks. Last but not least, Kevin Walker from the, I think it's Bella Victoria Vineyard. Is that right?
That's correct. Hello, my name's Kevin Walker. Thank you, Madam Chair, and the rest of the board. I didn't come here actually to speak today. I am a farmer. I represent Bella Victoria Vineyard in Amador County, just below the city of Plymouth, just below the Shenandoah Valley. After hearing the speakers today, I think this is relevant. I'm going to try to take you from the 30,000 foot level down to boots on the ground and share with you our individual experience. I think we were the first back in December to approach the board, District 5, for an emergency transfer of water from the city of Plymouth's sewer pond to our field, our vineyard. And I would like to thank the staff at District 5, particularly Ann Olson, for her progressive approach, and I believe balancing the needs of protecting the environment and helping us, the farmer.
Right.
And the city of Plymouth, being a disadvantaged community, did not, and forgive me if I don't have all the technical balances, this is all new to me, but they treat the water to a level of Title 22, but hadn't gone through a level Title 22 certification. They didn't have the funding for it, so we offered the funding. We partnered with the city. We approached District 5, and we are now currently going through a condensed permit process with District 5 to get to a Title 22 so that we can be permitted to use that water in the vineyard.
That's good.
I'm here today, and was directed to some staff today, thank you, to learn about funding sources. What I'm learning is I don't think there'll be funding enough to get the infrastructure in the place, even though I think we'll get the Title 22 and we'll have the right to divert the water. We may not have the funding for the infrastructure, so we'll begin immediately designing a temporary system. Their pumps aren't sufficient to move the quantity of water that we need. Currently, the city of Plymouth uses a land application, so they pump it to a field, the grass grows, and they have a herd of goats out eating it. So we want to transfer that water long-term and put it in production in a vineyard.
Right.
So the long-term funding is the question, and I hear a lot of reuse, and there's a need, and it seems like we might be on the progressive end of how to use this water. I just wanted to share our story and say the system seems to be working. Thank you all for your efforts, and we hope to get across the finish line and be able to save our crop.
Great. Well, thanks for the innovative thinking, but also for being willing to work with your neighbors to help them with the piece they were missing, and also for the good feedback about Ms. Olson, because we don't always get people who come and say someone did a great job. We know a lot of them do. People more often tell us when they're frustrated, sometimes before they've even talked to a person. So I appreciate that. Thank you for a thank you is kind of weird, but I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome.
Good. Thank you, and thank you for joining us today. I want to thank all of you. We could have had a conversation with each and every one of you. We had a little bit of that, but in the interest of hearing from everyone who came, we moved it along. But I actually got a lot of good ideas. But let me turn to my colleagues and see if there are any closing thoughts they want to make before I do. I'm going back to the left this time.
I just wanted to say it'd probably be a good idea for us to keep the board here apprised of the expert panel on direct potable reuse. I'd be interested in the first step, which is to identify the research needs that we need to have done to get to that point. So we'll be following up with your staff, I'm sure.
Terrific.
I appreciate everyone's participation, and as always, I'm especially appreciative that you invited us to share the podium with you. It's very helpful to listen from this side of the board, and I think the more that we share each other's board's agendas and the invitation to co-chair with each one of us in our different settings, I think it's a fabulous learning and collaboration experience, and I think it's a good model for our constituents to see as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And it's interesting, even though we also have constituents who come with the same expertise, but they are more comfortable in or more habitually go to one forum rather than both. So it's helpful.
Just want to thank everyone that participated, and it's been great to have you here. And all the different agencies join us, and it has, I think, it helps us to look at things a little differently. So to the extent that we can do this more often, I'd support that.
You've now given the staff a heart attack. I definitely, it's been wonderful to have everyone participating, but I do want to thank staff. They did this in record time. It's really quite remarkable that this array of experts and people from around the state have come in and offered such good ideas, and I think all of which we can use at some level. And so let us help you, if in any way we can, to sort through some of these things as to what we can do now, what we are going to need a little more time to do, what maybe someone else can do. And I'm saying this also to the other agencies that are here. Maybe we will form our own little drought team that helps to make sure that as much of this gets done as possible. But thank you. My goodness, thank you.
Yes, I echo the sentiments of my fellow board members. Thanks, everyone. It was a very substantive day. I wrote a lot of notes, and I echo Fran's offer, in terms of supporting staff's efforts to sort through all of these excellent ideas. And, this is California. We are the global leader for innovation, despite the fact that Australia got to experiment for 13 years. We're going to figure this out in a collaborative fashion, and we're going to have vital agriculture, environment, and urban areas, even through drought periods, because that's our normal way of doing things in California. So thanks, and I enjoyed having our fellow agencies up here as well, and certainly want to give them a chance to give some closing remarks. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of Natural Resources Conservation Service, we're delighted to have been here, and thank you for inviting us. And I did want to bring up two things. You mentioned curtailment over in Sonoma County as something you'll be looking at, and to the extent you can stretch that 30-day holding that they're requesting. We worked with the wine grape growers several years ago. We came up with a special initiative to offer wind machines as something that they could try in the areas in lieu of using water. And what we learned is that there was areas that worked and there was areas it did not work, and they really did need to have some water. And, you know, Bob, to your group, if we need to be offering wind machines again, call us soon, like tomorrow. Because we're taking signups right now through our emergency program, we could easily add that in. And the other one I wanted to bring up, back in November, Secretary Vilsack of USDA announced the Federal Drought Resilience Partnership, and that is co-led by Undersecretary Ann Mills, and the other co-leader is NOAA. And I was asked to write up notes from today for them, but also I think you heard resiliency a number of times, and this gives us an opportunity to send those ideas not only to them, but for them to then vet them within the federal family at DC, so that we can be working with Reclamation and NOAA, and both through their weather and their fisheries departments and others.
That's great.
Yeah, I just wanted to again thank the State Board for including us here on the dais, and it was very helpful to hear everyone's input in the different panels today. That it will help inform our work at DWR and the Water Use and Efficiency Branch and our drought team. I really looking forward to continuing this collaborative approach and working both within DWR with the different regions across the state in the IRWMP groups and the different agencies here in Sacramento. So thank you again. It was very informative.
Great, thank you very much. I just want to mention that we've gotten a few comments, not really so much comments, but questions across the email. You just heard one printing out there, and what I'll say to those of you who took the time to listen and also sent us questions, we'll have somebody answer those questions as opposed to doing it here. I think that we'll be able to give you a more specific answer, and we'll take the comment implicit in your question into account as we do a summary for ourselves of this particular meeting, and happy to share it with our colleagues on the dais. And so with that, I just want to add my thanks to staff, oh my gosh, and my thanks to all of you on the dais and people who are listening, people in the audience. Very substantial and robust day, and we look forward to continuing to work with you through the weeks and months ahead. This is going to be a game changer in California, and we have to do it with the most grace and respect for each other and listening that we can. And so I want to thank you all for your participation in that vein, and for what you did here today, but more importantly, what you're doing on the ground in your communities as well every day. And with that, may we close? Janine, have I forgotten anything? I may close. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you very, very much for joining us for the whole time.
Money guy.
I am.